Jim Harold's Campfire is brought to you by Simple Contacts. Simple Contacts is the most convenient way to renew your contact lens prescription and reorder your brand of contacts from anywhere in minutes. It's vision care for the 21st century. Campfire listeners can get $20 off your first order of contacts at simplecontacts.com/campfire20 or enter code campfire20 at checkout. Thanks, Simple Contacts. Jim Harold's Campfire is also brought to you by Quip. Quip was called the best electric toothbrush by GQ and the Tesla of toothbrushes by Bloomberg. Quip starts at just $25, and if you go to getquip.com/campfire right now, you'll get your first refill pack free with a Quip electric toothbrush. Again, get your first refill pack free at getquip.com/campfire. Thanks, Quip.
Welcome to our gathering tonight. Here we share stories of ordinary people who have experienced extraordinary things. Sit back, relax, and warm yourself by Jim Harold's Campfire.
Welcome to the Campfire. I am Jim Harold, and so glad to be with you today. And if you're new here, let me tell you what we do. We share real stories of real people who have encountered the supernatural. Could be ghosts, could be cryptid creatures, could be just head scratchers, things that don't quite make sense. Whatever they are, they're by real people who have had real experiences. We don't edit them. We don't tell them what to say. They come on the show and they say, Jim, this happened to me. So if that sounds like the kind of thing you like, hold on to your horses because this is the Campfire. Well, first up on the Campfire this week, we have a very special guest. And he told one of the best head scratchers on his podcast I've ever heard. And I said, would you mind telling on the Campfire? And of course, Richard Searet said, yes. Now, if you know that name, he is a renowned broadcaster and podcaster, guest host on Coast to Coast AM, has his own shows up in Canada. He's a podcaster with his conspiracy program and also one of my favorite podcasts, the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone. And that's where I heard this story. Richard, welcome to the program tonight.
Hey, Jim, a great pleasure to be with you again. Thank you.
So, okay. Now, the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone, for people who haven't heard it, it's about kind of like a merging of music and the supernatural, kind of weird things have happened in rock music. And this story surrounds someone who started out on this journey with you with rock and roll and the history of rock and roll and strange history. Tell us about R. Gary Patterson and how this all began.
Right. Well, R. Gary Patterson was a rock historian, author, a public school teacher for 40 years, lived just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, in a little Civil War era coal mining town called Oliver Springs. And he and I met on the radio probably 20 years ago. He was a frequent guest on my program, which sort of went through various incarnations at various radio stations and ultimately became The Conspiracy Show. And we probably talked on the radio for 15 years before we ever met face to face.
Wow.
And then I had occasion to meet him when he came up to Toronto with George Norrie doing a Coast to Coast event, a George Norrie live event in Toronto. So we finally met face to face. And then when I was doing my TV show, also called The Conspiracy Show, I was down in Nashville. And he was kind enough to drive from Knoxville to Nashville. And we did a couple of, a couple of episodes on the TV show. I think one of them was Elvis Presley and whether or not he had faked his own death. And the other one was on Jim Morrison. And then I brought Gary up for a live event of my own, in October of 2016. So around 2015, we got to talking and decided that it was time we worked on a project together, and we settled on a radio program that we hoped to syndicate that would include sort of his area of expertise, which was sort of the strange goings on, the lore, the legend, the myths behind rock and roll. And he was a musician as well, quite an accomplished guitarist. And I've long since had a passion for classic rock. And so we decided that it was going to be called The Spirit of Rock Radio, and we attempted to syndicate it, and it was a long, arduous process. Finally, in May of 2017, and we had been working on this steadily for 2 years, and on the phone with each other at least twice a week, or Skype, or texting, and so forth. And we produced a pilot episode, pitched it, sent demos around to various stations, and Gary happened to meet the general manager at a radio station in Knoxville, Tennessee, and they were intrigued. They liked the demo. So on Wednesday, I'm going to throw some dates out here, and they're important.
Okay.
Wednesday, May the 24th, Gary called me, and I remember this conversation vividly. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of All Saints Greek Orthodox Church in Toronto, waiting for my boys to come out from Greek school. I was there to pick them up. Gary called me and said, "Hey, Richard, I got a meeting for Monday with the general manager of this radio station in Knoxville. He wants to take the show." And after 2 years, I mean, we were just absolutely blown away that we were finally going to get our first station under our belt. And I said, "Oh, Gary, this is fantastic. It's finally going to pay off. Great work, buddy," because this meeting was all his doing. He did the legwork on this. So that was the Wednesday. And then I believe we chatted on the Thursday as well, just to sort of firm up details. Then, now, here's where things get interesting. I was absolutely positive that Gary called me late on a Friday night. I say late, it was dark out. And of course, we're talking spring, so might have been 8 o'clock. And I remember the phone call coming through. I saw his name on my cell phone. And I have a habit of walking and wandering sort of aimlessly, not really paying attention, wandering through the house with the phone to my ear. I'll wander into one room, out of another. No reason particularly why I would choose to go into this room or the next. So I happened to be in my office. I'm sitting down at my desk. And he said, "Hey, Richard," he said, "I've completely forgot that this coming Monday is Memorial Day. And we had the meeting scheduled for Monday." And he said, "So obviously, the meeting's not happening." Now, I can't remember whether I asked him, "Well, have you rescheduled?" If I did ask him, I can't remember whether he said yes or no. So we moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And by this time now, I'm wandering through the house. And at a certain point, I wander through the kitchen with the phone to my ear. And I remember my wife sitting at the kitchen table with my brother-in-law. And they were engaged in conversation. And obviously, they watched me as I walked through the kitchen and with the phone to my ear. And then I turned around, and then I ended up in the living room, and we're still chatting. And then again, I end up in my office, and Gary says a couple of things to me that are kind of strange. The first thing he says is, "Richard, you're a really cool dad." And I thought, wow, that's nice of you to say, Gary. But I wasn't really sure why he said that at that particular moment. We talked about my children. They'd met Gary. It just seemed to come out of the blue. "You're a really cool dad." And then he said, "You know what, Richard? You and I are a really big deal." And at the time I thought, okay, this is Gary doing what Gary does best. He's a great cheerleader. He's building us up. It's been a long, arduous road getting this project off the ground. He's trying to build us up in anticipation of the meeting. And that was just the way Gary was. "We're a really big deal," he said. Now, the last thing I said to Gary before I hung up was, "Well, have a great weekend and have a great Memorial Day." And then I said, because when I think of U.S. Memorial Day, I think of parades, I think of the flag, and I think of barbecues, right? You all have barbecues on Memorial Day.
Oh, yeah,
weekend.
absolutely.
So I said, "Gary, are you going to have a barbecue?" And this was very out of character because Gary had this wonderful Tennessee drawl, and he was always up and positive. And uh, just upbeat, and his tone changed abruptly. And he became almost curt with me, which I had never heard him do in 20 years. He said, there will be no barbecue. He was so emphatic. He just said it like that. There will be no barbecue. And I thought, wow, what did I stepped on a landmine here. Have I opened an old wound? Is there something going on with his family I don't know about? So I just left it alone. And that's the way the conversation ended, other than, goodbye. It ended on kind of a downer. And I thought, wow, that's strange. Well, I guess, I'll get to the bottom of it when we talk next. So Friday night, I go to bed, and normally I listen and I fall asleep listening to Coast to Coast. My wife has to have the radio on. She can't sleep without it. And we always listen to Coast. And Dave Schrader, my former colleague at Coast, was on the program that night, but I didn't hear any of it. I fell right asleep. I don't remember anything of Coast to Coast. Saturday morning, I jump out of bed, my usual routine. I go downstairs, have my supplements, my vitamins, make myself a cup of coffee, and I head out to the front porch, plop myself down, and I check my emails and my Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. Before the kids get up, it's my chance to just kind of relax and catch up. First thing, I check my email, and then I go into Facebook. And there is a Facebook message from Dave Schrader. I thought, that's interesting. What's this about? And he writes, Richard, I know you and Gary were close, so I thought you should be the first to know. If you didn't hear the show last night, Gary passed away last night.
Huh.
And I said, wait a minute. I immediately messaged him back. I said, this is nonsense. I talked to Gary last night. What on earth are you talking about? The next thing I did was just to call Gary on his cell phone. And of course, he didn't pick up. I left a message. I said, Gary, what's going on? I just spoke to Dave Schrader, Coast to Coast. He's talking some nonsense about you being dead. You want to give me a call, please, and straighten this out? Ha, ha, ha. Of course, Gary didn't call back because it was true. Gary had passed away. I later learned at about 6 p.m. Friday, May the 26th. So then I checked my recent call list on my phone. I saw the call there from Gary on Wednesday. I think there was one there from Thursday. But nothing on Friday. Not only were there no incoming calls, there were no outgoing calls. No one loved me on that Friday. I didn't receive a call, and I didn't call anyone.
That's very strange. The reaction to that was that's really strange because you clearly remember it. Your wife remembered it, and yet there's no electronic footprint whatsoever that had ever occurred.
I assumed I misremembered it. That's the first thing that went. That's the only prosaic explanation. I must be misremembering this. So the next thing I did was I ran up the stairs. My wife was getting out of bed, getting dressed. She saw the look on my face. She said, what on earth is wrong? And I said, Gary's dead. And she said, what? And without me prompting her, she said, weren't you talking to him last night? So for me, that was kind of confirmation. She said, well, you were talking to someone because I remember you wandering through the kitchen with the phone to your ear. And she said, you had a very far away look in your eye. And I meant to ask you who you were talking to, but I assumed it was Gary because she knew we were always on the phone together. So I decided immediately, and she agreed, that I had to go down to the funeral. And I'm still in shock. So that was the Saturday morning. I quickly got on the phone I called the funeral home just to confirm one more time that it was, in fact, Rudolph Gary Patterson that had passed away. And of course it was. And I was quite honest, I was devastated. Not only because, he was my friend, mainly because he was my friend, but also we had worked so hard on this and we were just so close. So I get on the plane. I fly down to Knoxville. From there, I take a cab into Oak Ridge, which was the closest town to Oliver Springs with a hotel. Oak Ridge is famous for being the home of the Manhattan Project back in 1942. They have the Oak Ridge Laboratory there, very secretive research base. Then from Oak Ridge, I took a cab into this idyllic little town, Oliver Springs. I walk into the funeral home, and there's Gary, decked out in, I believe it was a blue, kind of a powder blue metallic coffin. And there was a line waiting to pay their respects. And there on a stand in front of the casket was Gary's electric guitar. I believe it was a Fender Stratocaster. And his older brother, who I had never met, I later learned named Mike, was standing in front of the casket. I went to pay my respects, and I was choked up. My throat was constricted. I mean, I've been to so many funerals. So many relatives. I've been a pallbearer probably more times than I can count. But for some reason, this one it hit me so hard. And I could barely get out. I could barely say to Mike, my sincere condolences. I'm sorry for your loss. My name is Richard. And first thing he did was he thanked me. He knew all about me. He thanked me for flying in all the way from Toronto. He said, Gary spoke of you often. And I thought about that phone call. Should I say anything? No, it's not. That's going to sound so strange. And this is not the place. And if Gary was going to call anyone from beyond, he would have called his family, not me. But there was one thing I wanted to ask him. It kind of gnawed at me. And that was that bit about the barbecue.
Right.
And so I managed to sort of just spit it out. Well, here goes. I'll just ask. I said, Michael, one of the last things I asked your brother was about whether he was having a barbecue this weekend, Memorial Day weekend. And I said, he got kind of testy with me. And he said, there will be no barbecue. And Michael looked at me. He had a very confused look on his face. And he said, he said that to you? And I said, yeah, why? So the day he died, he was out all that afternoon looking for a barbecue. He spent $500 on a new barbecue, spent the rest of the day putting it together on his back porch. That's one of the last things he did before he died. There will be no barbecue. He was right. So, am I misremembering this? It's possible. I have confirmation from my wife. There's that strange thing with no digital footprint on my phone, and yet I remember the conversation. And that bit about the barbecue. Is it possible he called me after he died at 6:00? And when I asked him about the barbecue, here he had spent the whole day buying it, putting it together, spending the money, and then only to die before having a chance to use it. Is that why he was kind of upset? So that's my story as best as I can remember it. And I always offer the caveat. I could be misremembering, but then my wife would be misremembering. So if it's true, then I witnessed something, or I took part in something that can only be described as supernatural. And that, I talk about these things on the radio. That stuff doesn't happen to me, but it did, I think.
See, I love that, because there's so many people, there's people who say, and I don't mean to cast aspersions, but some people say, hey, I meet with the aliens every third Thursday of the month. And when you have someone who says, hey, this stuff, I'm open-minded, but this stuff doesn't happen to me. And they say, an example like yours, I think it's extremely, extremely credible. I'm kind of reminded of that old song by the Righteous Brothers, Rock and Roll Heaven. So you pretty much had a phone call from Rock and Roll Heaven in a manner of sorts.
It's entirely possible that I did. And that I always sort of draw some solace from that fact that, although Gary, didn't get to, enjoy the success of the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone, which was sort of relaunched as a podcast and changed the name and so forth. And, Gary pops up often in the episodes because he and I talked so many times. I have so much tape, as we used to say. But I draw solace from that at least he got to perhaps meet, some of the legends, the rock legends that he admired so much, John Lennon and Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison. And just one final thing. One of the things that Gary loved to talk about was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Oh, yes.
I mean, his first book was called The Walrus Was Paul, which was sort of the definitive book which addressed the whole Paul is dead rumor that McCartney died in a car crash in 1966 and the Beatles replaced him with a talented lookalike and then felt so guilty about it that they left clues, a trail of clues like breadcrumbs in their song lyrics, backward masking, and in their album cover art, particularly Sgt. Pepper's. And he would talk for hours about that. And that album was released in the United Kingdom on May 26, 1967. Gary passed away May 26, exactly 50 years to the day.
Wow. There are no coincidences, a wise man once said. Very, very strange indeed. And the thing is that I want everybody that listens to the Campfire to check out the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone. It is a great show. It's must listening in my household. In fact, I drive my youngest daughter to high school. She's a sophomore now in high school. And every Wednesday, I believe it is, I say, we got to tune in to the latest Rock and Roll Twilight Zone. So I know that we're going to be releasing this on Thursday, the 20th, September 20th. I think that the new season will have premiered by now. What can folks expect if they tune into the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone, and where can they do so?
Actually, I took a bit of a hiatus. I took a week off between season 1 and season 2. So season 2 is now going to debut or premiere on Wednesday, September I believe it's the 26th.
Okay, great. We're ahead of the curve.
Indeed. Great timing, as always, Jim. And we're going to address the whole Bon Scott, his life, his career, his tragic death in February of 1980. So I'll be speaking with 2 rock journalists and a woman who has sort of described herself as Bon's soulmate. They spent a lot of time together. In fact, I believe Bon spent his last Christmas with Mary Renshaw. So those 3 individuals will be along for what I think will be a pretty incredible ride as we talk about Bon Scott of AC/DC.
Very good. Richard Syrett, always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you. We're so generous with your time and sharing this story. And I sincerely hope our Campfire crew here, we tune in and check out the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone and everything you do. It's fantastic. Thanks again, Richard.
Thank you, Jim.
Jim Harold's Campfire is brought to you by Simple Contacts. Simple Contacts is the most convenient way to renew your contact lens prescription and reorder your brand of contacts from anywhere in minutes. It's vision care for the 21st century, and it's so convenient. We've all got a million things going on, and contacts shouldn't be something to worry about. Simple Contacts lets you renew your prescription and reorder your contacts from anywhere in minutes. Your couch, your office. Right now, the doctor's office is wherever you are with Simple Contacts. It's fast. The Simple Contacts vision test is self-guided, and it takes less than 5 minutes via your smartphone. Now, think of how much time you save compared to making an appointment, getting to the eye doctor, taking time off. And it's also a big, big money saver. The vision test is only $20. Compare that with an appointment without insurance could cost you up to $200. The contact lens prices are unbeatable. Standard shipping is free. And best of all, we're offering a promotion to our listeners. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But not only that, when I'm presented with these kind of things, sometimes I'm a little skeptical. It's like, well, is this reliable? Does it offer all the choice of all the different brands? How are people rating it? Well, the thing is that first of all, it is reliable. It's designed by doctors and licensed ophthalmologists, and they review every test carefully to make sure your eyes look healthy and that your vision hasn't changed. You can get all the brands that you want to access and types of lenses. You don't have to worry about that. And they are at a terrific price. And it is a 5-star experience. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Take the word of 4,500 people who have rated it 5 stars over on the App Store. And the nice thing is it's got great technology, but there's real people too. You can text with the support team and always get to speak with a person. No automated robot systems, real people. And I had that experience. I had a question. I sent out a quick text, got it right back, got all the clarification I needed. It was great. If you wear contacts and I wear contacts, this is the way to go. I took the vision test, very simple, very easy. This is to renew your existing prescription, just to be clear. And it just was easy. It really lives up to that word, simple contacts. Now, quickly, I do want to mention this. This isn't a replacement for your periodic full eye health exam. You need to do this occasionally. But simple contacts, just to renew your prescription, they test that current prescription still works and still helps you see 20/20, and you can renew that prescription very simply with simple contacts. Now, best of all, not only do you get that standard free shipping, their regular great prices, but special Campfire offer. Get $20 off your first order of contacts at simplecontacts.com/campfire20 or enter the code Campfire20 at checkout. Again, get $20 off your first order of contacts at simplecontacts.com/campfire20 or enter code Campfire, the number 2 and the number 0 at checkout. I know that you will like them. Contact wears. This is the solution. No pun intended. Simple Contacts. You got to check it out. They're great and you'll love it. Thanks, Simple Contacts.
If you love these great ghost stories, please tell a friend about Jim Harold's Campfire today. Now, we return to the show.
Well, next up on the Campfire, a fellow Ohioan. I always love to talk to a fellow Buckeye. Trace is on the line. He has a couple of experiences he's going to talk about, and the first one happened about 20 years ago at Ohio University. Trace, welcome to the program, and thanks so much for joining us. Tell us what happened.
Jim, thanks for having me. A big fan of the show and really happy to participate.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this story happened, or this experience happened in 1997. I was a junior at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. And before I can kind of get into the meat of the story, I have to provide a little bit of background.
Okay.
So I lived in a house. It was a house off campus. And I think we had about 15 to 20 people could live in there. There were 12 bedrooms on the second and third floor. And then the bottom floor was all just common area, kitchen, dining room, all that. And so the kind of the folklore of the house, and I learned this when I first moved in, was that apparently someone back in the 80s around Halloween, because Halloween is big at OU, had invited a medium into the house to conduct a seance. This was long before my time, so this was all secondhand, but this was kind of the story that was passed down kind of from resident to resident every year. And the story goes that this medium came in and they did this seance in the basement, and the medium had said that there were several, ghosts or spirits, whatever you want to call them, living in the house. But the caveat was that they typically would only kind of come out or be active when there weren't a lot of people there.
Huh.
Right. So we had about, 20 people living there. It was always loud. This was a fraternity house. So a lot of parties, a lot of just, commotion, people coming in and out of the house constantly. There was very rarely ever, a quiet time, even in the middle of the night. So I was staying there over our 6-week winter break. Ohio University had a long winter break from right before Thanksgiving until New Year's. 95% of the campus goes home.
Right.
And because I was working a job there, I was staying in the house, and I was going to be the only one staying there. And for some reason, our landlord, and I always assumed this was because we weren't necessarily paying to stay there over the winter break, he would turn the heat way down.
Right.
So whoever was staying there, it was space heaters. You were keeping your door shut. That was really the only way to stay warm in the house, because the rest of the house was pretty cold. So anyway, everything was fine. I'm staying by myself in this huge house. Didn't really have any experiences at all from, the first few, or from, Thanksgiving until Christmas Eve. So I'm there, every night I'm working, I come back, staying by myself, no issues whatsoever. So Christmas Eve comes, and it's midday. I'm guessing it's probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was getting ready to pack up my bags and head home for Christmas, with my family. And so I had, my door closed, space heater was on because it was the only way to stay warm in the house. And I packed up a bag and I take my suitcase down the hall, down the back steps into the back parking lot, put it in my car. It was, pretty cold. We're talking, December in Athens, Ohio. So it was pretty chilly. So I figure I'm going to, start my car. I'll let it run for 5 or 10 minutes to warm up. I'll finish packing and then I'll be on my way. So I go back into the house. Car's running and I'm, finishing up and I'm about to leave. Again, my door's closed to keep the heat into into my bedroom. And I'm about to leave when my phone rings. And it turns out that it was a friend of mine who also lives in the house, but he had gone home back to Massachusetts for the 6-week winter break. And so we were just, chit-chatting about, what our break's been like and what we're doing for Christmas and New Year's, that type of thing. And we're about to end the conversation and he says, again, him knowing the same folklore of the house that I did, he says, Trace, I have to ask you, you've been there, for several weeks by yourself. Have you seen anything or experienced anything strange in the house? And I said, John, I can tell you with absolute certainty, there is nothing scary in this house. This house is not haunted.
Famous last words.
Famous last words, because as soon as I finished that sentence, now I'm in a room, my bedroom is like 15 foot square. It's not that big. And I'm only a few feet away from my door. It's, one of these hollow core cheapo doors that a landlord throws on. And as soon as I finish that sentence, there are these 3, I don't even want to call them knocks. I'll call them pounds on my door, big, heavy enough that I could see the door kind of bow in with each shot. And it was, 3, bang, 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 right one after the next. And I froze, because I knew I was the only one in the house. The house has, the combination door locks on the front and back. So you don't need a key to get in, but you do need a combination to get in. And I knew there was no one in the house. And so it took me a few seconds to get up the courage to open the door. And my friend even asked me over the phone. It was loud enough for him to hear it. And he said, who's that? And I opened the door and there's nothing. And where my bedroom was positioned on the second floor, it was at the top of the steps. So I stick my head out and there's nothing. I look down one hallway. It's all dark, nothing. I looked down the other hallway, all dark and nothing. The only light was the coming off of the emergency exit lights above the back door. And then I walked into the bath. I went out in the hall and walked into the bathroom because that was right next to my bedroom. No one in there. And the thing about this house is, having lived there for a while, it's old. You can hear anything in that house. You can hear people come in the downstairs. You can hear people come up and down those steps all throughout the night. It was a real pain in the butt throughout the year. But, there was nothing. I didn't hear any of that. And it was just complete silence. And I told, my friend, I said, John, I've got to go. And I hung up the phone and I put it back up and turned off my heater, grabbed my bag. And I probably moved down that hallway faster than I ever had in my lifetime. Got in the car and drove all the way back to Cincinnati, Ohio without stopping, just white knuckled the whole way. And it was just that pounding. I have an idea. I don't know what it was, but it definitely held with the folklore of, these things kind of coming out when there was no one around. And I think just me trying to say that, hey, this place is fine and this doesn't exist. That's all it needed to hear.
Now, you said you thought you had an idea what it was. What do you think it was?
Well, just the idea that, having been there for 2 years, and I actually lived in the house for 2 years in 2 different bedrooms. But my brother lived in the house 4 years earlier than I did. And he had an experience in the kitchen, which was much more vivid than mine. He actually saw something down there where I just had the audible experience. But, throughout the years, there's always been people that had stories there. And we had people come back all the time for homecoming, people that lived in the house. And, they would all have their own stories. And so, I don't know specifically what it was, but it tends to jive with a lot of the things that I had heard from other people. And I had 1 year in homecoming before I had my experience. Someone came and visited and we were chit-chatting over a few beers and we found out that he lived in the same room that I did. I lived in room 5. And he used to tell me that he lived with a roommate in that room. When I was there, I was by myself. But over the weekends, his roommate would go home, I guess because he enjoyed spending time with his family. He would stay there and, 2 or 3 times a week in the middle of the night, the stereo would turn on, like super loud blast. Always in that room. And there was someone else that I spoke with who lived in that room who would always hear kind of knocking in the closet. We had a really small closet there. So, I mean, it definitely kind of matched with some of the other experiences that other people had of something happening in that specific room. So,
Very cool. Now, you also had an experience that involved your son. Tell us about that one.
yeah, this one I think for me was a lot more easier to discount than some of the things that I had, some of the experiences that I've personally experienced. This was, my son is now 7, so this was probably 4 years ago when he was 3. And the way we built this house that we currently live in, and the way it's kind of laid out is my son and daughter's room are upstairs, and then you kind of come down a few steps, and that's where our master bedroom is on that that smaller level, and then you go down a few more steps and you're on the main level. So this was one night, it was probably 2 or 3 in the morning, and he comes in and wakes me up out of a dead sleep. And I just assumed, I don't know, maybe he had an accident, or maybe he had a bad dream or whatever. And he said, Daddy, there's a boy in my room. And so of course, as a father, you kind of you wake right up at that point. And I kind of ran up the steps because I wasn't exactly sure what he was talking about. But I get in there, and all of his lights are off except for this. He had a Lightning McQueen race car nightlight. It was kind of the one that sat on top of the nightstand, not the little one that plugged into the wall. And that actually put out quite a bit of light. And so I run in, and he comes in behind me, and so then I'm starting asking him for more information. And I said, "What did you see?" And he said, "Well, there was this boy sitting behind my rocking chair." And we had one of those gliders that every parent gets when they have a kid. And so I'm looking behind there, and obviously there's nothing there. I don't see anything. And so I'm pressing him and asking him what it is that he saw. Can he describe it to me? And he said, it was this boy, and he said and this I'll never forget. He said it looked like me, but he didn't have a face.
Ooh.
And that kind of gave me chills. And so I'm looking for an experience because he's asking me what it is. And he's hesitant to even come back into the room. And so I noticed that right next to between the nightlight and the rocking chair is this large Darth Vader figure that we got. It was, kind of 2.5, 3 feet tall. And so, my brain's kind of, in fast gear trying to figure out what this could possibly be. And I said, well, what it probably is? It's probably the shadow that your nightlight is casting across Darth Vader. You probably saw just the shadow on the wall behind, because that would have been about the general vicinity where he thought he saw something. And right away he said, no, he said, that's not it. He said, shadows are black. And I said, well, what did you see? And he said, the boy I saw was white. And so he started calling him the white boy. And, to this day, I don't really have, an explanation as to what it is. I'm assuming it was just a nightmare because we had, it was a new house. There's no history to the house. He's never experienced anything like that, again, since then. So I kind of just chalked it up to maybe a spooky dream, and I'm hoping to leave it at that.
Well, it is indeed a strange, strange world we live in, Trace. And again, these things happen, and I believe that they happen. That kind of doppelganger piece of that's always one that's fascinating. Before I really started doing this show, I didn't realize how common doppelgangers were, but that more and more I hear more and more people talking about them. Now, I did want to mention something. I understand you wrote a novella, and part of it was based on your son's story. Is that right?
Yes, it was. I actually write crime novels, mainly private investigator and detective fiction. And I had written, it was my 3rd book that was with my editor, and she was going to have it for about 2 months. So I really kind of needed something to fill my time, and I wasn't ready to start on my next book. So I just started writing kind of his experience, thinking it was going to be this, I'll just turn it into a short story and take some creative liberties or whatever. And it ended up being like a 20,000 word novella. So I ended up publishing that, called The White Boy. And it's the first chapter is pretty much almost verbatim, the exact experience that happened that evening with my son. And then, of course, that's where our story ended. So I, had to make up the rest of it. So, in the novella, it takes a much darker turn than what my son and I experienced. And hopefully we'll never have to experience anything like that in the novella at all. Very, very scary indeed. And where can people find that, by the way? The best place is my website, traceconger.com, just TraceConger, or it's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and any of the online retailers. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Trace, for being a part
of the Campfire.
Thanks for having me, Jim. It's been a lot of fun.
We have a return caller on the show tonight. Angela is with us, and she has talked to us about some ghost hunting activity, paranormal investigation. But tonight she is going to talk to us about some doppelganger experiences. And if you've listened to the show anytime at all, you know this is a theme that keeps coming up, one that I'm certainly fascinated by, and I'm sure many of you are as well. So, Angela, thank you for joining us again. And tell us what happened to you in regard to doppelgangers.
I have several doppelganger experiences. My parents actually purchased a cabin up at Salt Fork. And after we had moved in, it wasn't too long after we moved in, we remodeled, we put an addition on. Well, on the new part where we just put an addition on, it would be the old part, but the old part, we actually had a bathroom that we turned into a walk-in closet, and that's where most of the doppelgangers would show up. For instance, my mother would be in the closet. I would see her in the hallway because there's a hallway that runs on one side, and then there's a bedroom that's the new part that's attached to the other side of the closet. And the closet actually opens up into both the hall and the bedroom. So you could just glance in the bedroom or glance in the hallway, and if there's somebody else in that closet that's walking in and out the closet, either way, you could see them easily.
Right.
I saw my mother walk into the closet, and then I turned around and she's on the sofa, sound asleep.
Oh my goodness.
So I just saw her go into the closet, and also she's on the sofa at the same time, and it startled me, and I didn't know what to think about that. Well, maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me. But at the time, we have 2 dogs, and one of them, Rusty, my little Sheltie Collie mix, he kind of looks like a little lassie. I saw him outside, and I was just taking a peek outside to see what he was doing in the front yard, or rather the backyard there, the porch. And I turned my head and looked in that closet because that closet door was open, and I was going to walk through there to get to the bedroom, and he was also in the closet.
Oh, man. So
he walked out of the closet.
Whoa.
He was in the yard at the same time.
Oh, my goodness.
So I don't know which one. I think the one in the closet was the real Rusty, and the one in the yard was the doppelganger Rusty.
Wow. Now, do you have a theory about this? What causes this? Because
there's something that did give me a clue, because I had a doppelganger experience in my apartment, and I'm about 110 miles from the cabin, so I know it's not something that's either attached to me or maybe something in the area. I'm not sure, but my doppelganger experience in the apartment was the most startling one. I was just getting up in the morning, just got out of bed and was going to get dressed, and I walked in the hallway, and I see myself in the hallway getting dressed.
Oh boy.
I looked right into my own face, and then it just disappeared but it was there for a few minutes. I was looking at myself. And that whole week, I remember feeling extremely drained. And what I did after I saw the doppelganger, I had some holy salt that was blessed by a priest, and I sprinkled that everywhere. And I actually felt the atmosphere change, and I actually felt reinvigorated, because after that, it felt like something left. And I felt reinvigorated and got all my energy back. So I felt like it was like maybe the doppelganger is some sort of parasite. That is maybe an energy parasite of some kind that is just draining your energy or is latched onto you, and it's just taking the form of what's familiar in that environment.
Oh my goodness. You know, the thing is that there are different theories on it. Some people think kind of what you're describing, that it's maybe there's some malevolent goings on there, and maybe it is kind of sapping the energy. I've heard things like that before. Other people think there's an alternate universe, and you somehow kind of crossed into it, and there was another Angela in that universe, a perfect copy of you getting dressed, and there was your dog and your mom, and it's just really interesting to me, and it hints, as I've said many times on the show, I think the world is a far stranger place than we really give it credit for, and kind of our everyday goings on. We just kind of slough off these things, but I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes, Angela.
Absolutely. And in each of those cases, I didn't sense any malevolence or any kind, but just that one in my apartment really felt drained, like something was trying to drain off my energy. That was different. And it wasn't like that at the cabin. So I don't know what the other doppelgangers were at the cabin in that instance, but I would agree with you. There's a lot of things that are left unexplained that we don't know about yet that still need to be explored and somehow measured. And we just don't have the ability to measure or quantify these experiences yet.
Yeah, and the thing is that it's one thing maybe to see a doppelganger of someone else or of your beloved pet, but seeing a doppelganger of yourself, that one, to me, that would really set me back on my heels.
It certainly did me because I was taught, and well, it was basically through oral tradition, there's regarding the doppelgangers that I believe originated in Europe as far as the legend is. If you see your own doppelganger, that's supposed to foreshadow your own immediate demise or your own immediate death. And there's all sorts of stories about that, but I don't believe that for a moment. Obviously, I'm still here.
Right.
So that there must not be a whole lot of truth to that. They could be just some type of life form that we're just not familiar with, and it's just maybe not very smart, but maybe it could just mimic other whatever it's an environment. That's what it tends to do, is just mimic what's there because it's part of that environment now. Like maybe an octopus might camouflage or change its shape in order to blend into its surroundings and kind of look natural in those surroundings.
Well, it is indeed a mystery, and thank you, Angela, for once again exploring the mysteries with us on the Campfire.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks a lot, Angela. That was great.
Thank you. You're wonderful as always, Jim.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good to speak with you, and you have a great evening. I appreciate you calling.
Well, thank you so much, and I'll certainly talk to you later. I'll be going to Post-Town Elementary this Friday for another investigation.
Excellent. Please keep us updated, and thanks a lot, Angela, and you have a great night.
Thanks, you too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Jim Harold's Campfire is brought to you by Quip. The truth is, most of us are brushing our teeth wrong, not for long enough, and we forget to change our brushes on time. And that's because most toothbrush brands focus on selling flashy gimmicks rather than better brushing. But that's not Quip. Quip is different. And here's what makes them different. For starters, Quip is an electric toothbrush that's a fraction of the cost of bulkier brushes, and it still packs just the right amount of vibrations to help you clean your teeth. Quip's built-in timer helps you clean for the dentist-recommended 2 minutes with guiding pulses that remind you when to switch sides. Next, Quip subscription plans are for your health, not just convenience. They deliver new brush heads on a dentist-recommended schedule every 3 months for just $5, including free shipping worldwide. And Quip also comes with a mount that suctions right to your mirror and unsticks to use as a cover for hygienic travel wherever you take your teeth. And finally, everyone loves Quip. They were on Oprah's own list, named one of Time's best inventions, and it's the first subscription electric toothbrush accepted by the American Dental Association. And I think that's a huge deal. And they're backed by a network of over 20,000 dentists and hygienists, and hundreds of thousands of happy brushers like me use Quip every day. And I really do like Quip because I never thought about this kind of thing before. You just kind of throw your toothbrush in your mouth mindlessly. You're waking up and you're like, groggy. But really, you can't do anything that's much more important for your health because really, it really is important to have good dental hygiene. And for the first time in my life, I think I'm brushing the right way, and that's because of Quip. Now, Quip starts at just $25, but we have a deal for you. If you go over to getquip.com/campfire right now, you'll get your first refill pack free with a Quip electric toothbrush. Again, your first refill pack free at getquip.com/campfire. That's spelled GETQUIP.com/campfire. Start brushing your teeth right. Don't you think it's time? Get Quip. Thanks, Quip.
Now back to Jim Harold's Campfire.
Next up on the Campfire is Ryan from the great state of North Carolina, and he has a story about a ghost, but maybe a different kind of ghost than we really usually think about. Ryan, welcome to the program. Thank you for listening. I know our friends over at Astonishing Legends led you to us, like so many people, so thank the guys over there. Ryan, tell us what happened.
Hey, Jim, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So, like you said, this is a ghost story, but it's like a different kind. I would say it probably fits into your head scratcher category.
Yeah.
Me and my friend, we term it the ghost dog story, but we never actually saw anything. So that's the interesting part. The situation behind the story, every summer I have this meadow. It's like a squarish piece of land. It's cornered by a creek and then a road that covers around the other two corners. And it's a perfect spot for us to just hang out. Me and my friends would, middle school, and then especially in high school, we would hang out probably 5 or 6 times a summer and just we had a campfire down there, and we would just hang out and have some fun. And this particular story happened between my freshman and sophomore year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
And this time, though, we weren't camping out because what happened earlier that summer was my cousin and his friends, they would like to sneak up onto the campsite and scare us. And especially late at night, so it's kind of fun. And then this time I found out they were going to have a campfire. So my cousin's a year older than me, and so was his friends. And I decided to try and take me and my friends to scare them as well. Get a little bit of revenge, to say. And if you think about the road, if you think of the letter U and you turn it upside down, so the curved part is up on the top, but the curve is more flat instead of a curve. So there's 2 in each corner. There's 2 sharp turns.
Right.
And then if you're looking at the upside down U, the top left is kind of where one point of the square field is.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that sharp curve leads down to a bridge where the creek runs through. And then there's a barn and a horse pasture. And at this barn, there is a light pole that has one of those lights that the power company would put in to light the road up.
Right.
So even though we're in a pretty rural area, 15 minutes from any major town, you could still see the road. It was well lit. And then on top of this, it was a full moon. And it was one of the brightest full moons of the summer that I can remember. So you could see, even if you weren't walking down a road that had light on it. So that kind of plays into the story later on. So me and my friends, one of them was my neighbor. 2 of them were friends that weren't really familiar with the area. And we waited a little bit after 12 o'clock in order to give them a little time to get settled in and make a lot of noise, so that way we could sneak down there without them hearing us.
Right.
So we left from my neighbor's house, which is probably 1.5 miles, maybe 3/4 of a mile up the road. And so we're walking down, taking our time, not rushing, not making any noise. And then we get past the horse pasture, and we pass the barn, and we pass the bridge. And so now we're going into that sharp curve I just told y'all about. And they're down an embankment to the left. There's a patch of woods about 30 feet wide. So it's not real thick, but it's dense enough that we were going to take a shortcut through there, and it would lead us straight to this campsite.
Right.
And so my friend, he probably had 6 or 7 people down there with him, and they were being pretty loud. So we thought it was perfect. We could be able to crawl through, or not crawl through, but walk through the woods. If we took our time, we wouldn't make a lot of noise. Get a good jump and scare the guys. We got about halfway through the woods, and I forgot to say there's 4 of us. So it's me, my neighbor, and 2 of my friends. And then we got halfway through the woods, and I had totally forgotten that my cousin has this Rottweiler and a Pit Bull mix. And this dog was about 4 years old, very large, and very intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
But this dog is pretty much a lap dog. I grew up around this dog, and he's still living to this day. Never attacked anybody. They get a bad rap, these dogs do. But at night, coming through the woods, this dog's probably going to think we're intruders, and, has a pretty intimidating bark. And we got about halfway through this woods, and I looked at my neighbor and I said, I don't think this is a good idea. I forgot the dog was down here at the campsite. Because the dog had heard us actually and started growling. And I told my neighbor, I said, he's already alerted my cousin and his friends. And plus, if we go any further, I'm afraid that we might get dog bit. And not only was our cover blown, I was afraid of me and my friends getting hurt. And so at that point, I suggested to turn around and maybe try again later.
Right.
Because I had hoped the dog would have stayed up at my cousin's house and wouldn't have been at the campsite.
Mm-hmm.
So my neighbor and then one of my other friends, one of the two friends I had brought with me, he actually wanted to keep going. And one of my really good friends, he said, "No, man, I'm kind of scared and I want to turn back." And so I said, "Well, I'm not going to leave you here in the woods by yourself because you don't really know the area. So I'll walk back with you." So we left at that point. Me and one of my really good friends, we head back to the road, and then my neighbor and my other friend stayed, and they were halfway through the woods. And at that point, that dog was still barking on the other side of those woods. We made our way back up to the road, and finally, when we climbed that embankment and we got to the road, we heard some ruffling in the woods, but coming from a different area that my friends were in. And we thought that was kind of odd. But it sounded just like an animal, animal on four legs coming through the brush. And, we stood still to listen to it for a second, and then we realized it was kind of coming towards us. So at this point, we got a little bit spooked, and I thought this dog that was at the campfire was coming through for us. And I thought, there's no way this dog, made it past my two friends in the woods and kept coming towards us. I feel like they would have stopped earlier. This dog would have. But when the noises kept coming, you could hear, the breathing. You could hear like a dog has a necklace with when the necklace rattles when the dog moves. That's
right.
what we could hear. So at that point, it scared us really good, and we took off running down the road. And we probably got 10, 15 feet ahead of this animal, and we could hear the claw marks on the road. That's how clear this was. Exactly. Whew. And that made us run even faster. And I thought, my God, this dog's giving chase. Definitely thinks we're intruders. And if we don't run to that light pole that had the light on it, the street light, that's our best chance of this dog being able to see me, recognize me as as a friend. And then hopefully I could talk the dog down from being so aggressive. And so I told my friend, I said, just run to that barn and hide on the side of it. And that way we would have enough time to hide. Maybe the dog would come around the corner, and then I could have a chance to talk the dog down so it wouldn't attack us. So we're it's giving us a good chase. You could hear the claw marks behind us. You could hear the thing breathing, and you could hear the necklace rattling. And our blood was pumping. Our adrenaline was up. We get to that barn. We pull up against the wall. Our backs are against the wall. We're looking to our right, so we're looking to the road, and the horse pasture's in front of us, and the road's on the right. And then, as we're sitting there, we're trying to hold our breath, not to be loud, hopefully, and we could hear this animal, and it runs right past us, Jim, and it runs probably 30 feet up in front of us, and then the noises just quit. No more claw marks, no more breathing, no more of the necklace rattling, and then just absolute silence. And not just silence from the animal, but silence from nature. There was no crickets chirping. I'm sure I could hear the creek running, but I wasn't focused on that. It was just complete silence. And we thought this was really odd. I look over at my friend and I say, where did it go? And he said, and this is funny, he said, where did what go? And I said, exactly. I didn't see anything. Uh-huh. And remember that street light was there. It was a full moon.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, did you hear that? And he said, absolutely. And I said, it ran up to like right up there. And I pointed up to the spot on the road where I heard it stop. And he said, I heard the same thing. And we sat there for probably a good minute, not moving, because, maybe we missed it. Maybe we just didn't see it. And then for a minute straight, we didn't hear anything. And if it would have ran up to the right, there was a patch of woods. So I figured we would have heard noises running through the woods again. And if it would have run out into the horse pasture, we would have been able to see it. I mean, it was well lit. And like I said, we waited for about a minute, and then we just took off and ran up the road back to my neighbor's house. We were going to wait on him and my other friend to return from the campsite. And we talked about it for about an hour, trying to wrap our heads around what in the world just happened. And when my neighbor and my friend got back, the first question I asked him, I said, did that dog ever leave the campsite? And he said, no. So right there, the hair, my hair started standing up on the back of my neck and my arms, and I just got real scared. And,
sure.
I said, okay, well, he has multiple dogs. My cousin does. And I thought, was there another dog at the campsite? And that's what I asked my neighbor. And he said, nah, man. He said, the only dog there was my cousin's dog. And he said that dog, when he saw my neighbor, he said he didn't growl anymore. He didn't bark, and he instantly recognized him. And they said they didn't get to scare my cousin, which was kind of a bummer, but at least they didn't get bit by the dog. But I really can't explain, what gave chase to us that night. I even talked to my friend about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we still have the same recollection of the events that happened, and we still can't explain it to this day. I don't know what to say.
So essentially, you were being chased by, you thought, this one dog, but there's no way it could have been that dog. And you didn't. Yeah. So it was some other dog, but you never saw it. So really, it's a ghost dog.
That's the only way I can describe it, Jim. It sounded just like a dog. It was breathing. It was growling like a dog. And I've never really heard of any other stories about ghost dog. I've heard of hellhounds, but I wouldn't describe this because I didn't get that, immense fear. I just had fear of like a dog chasing me.
Now, let me just throw something out here. I'm not saying what it is, but a lot of times when we do these things, they're like thought experiments. So let me just throw this out here. Now, on some of the shows, my other shows, the Paranormal Podcast and things, we've talked about the idea of tulpas. Have you ever heard of the idea of a tulpa, Ryan?
No, I don't think I have.
A tulpa is a thought form. And there is a line of thinking, particularly in the East, that you can conjure something up by thinking about it strongly enough. And I'm just throwing it out. One possibility could be that your ghost dog was maybe a tulpa. Maybe after thinking about this dog so much, not that you were imagining it, but you actually created it. Now, I'm not saying that's what it was. I'm just saying some people might think that, and I think that's an interesting possibility.
Oh, very interesting and quite scary.
Yeah. Look that up. Tulpa, Tulpa. If anybody out there is listening and doesn't know what I'm talking about, fascinating thing. We've talked about that with David Weatherly, who does also a lot of work on the Black-Eyed Kids. Well, Ryan, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Interesting story about a phantom dog, and hopefully it won't chase you anymore.
Yeah, I hope not, Jim. All right, have a good one.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Campfire. I told you it was going to be a good one. And a couple of things. Many of you may not know that I have books. There are 5 Campfire books that you can get right now. All you have to do is go to jimharoldbooks.com, and all the links are there. They point over to Amazon. That's jimharoldbooks.com. There's 5 of them, and you can get them in paperback, and you can also get them on the Kindle. And pretty much 4.5 5-star reviews across the board, and we've done a few of them. And if you like the Campfire, you'll love the Campfire books because they're basically the best of the Campfire. So they're great as a gift or for your own enjoyment. So check that out. Also, please subscribe to the Campfire. You can do that by going to jimharold.com/campfire, and you can click on whatever applicable link for whatever your favorite podcast app is, or if you don't have one, you can choose one. There's also my free Jim Harold Spooky Studio app. So I hope you check all that out, because this time of year we're getting into spooky season big time, and this is when we can grow our audience, and part of that is rising up in the charts. So please go over. If you're not subscribed, please do that today. right now, actually, jimharold.com/getcampfire for all those links for Apple, Android, and so forth. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. And most importantly, and as always, stay spooky. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Jim Harold's Campfire. Tune in again next time for more stories of ordinary people who have experienced extraordinary things.
Tụi này lại đau đầu con cáo đây. Đọc tin nhắn chưa Hải?
Thành mày ngáo à? Chân thì mình Thầy cũng không thích.
Hải, tổng tập bao nhiêu xong rồi sẽ đi đâu nữa? Đưa tay ở đây có mỗi tay nên là thì đi đâu?
Về tin còn 17.
Thứ bảy á?
Qua tôi bắn 23/7 vào để bay một tháng.
Ủa?
Sao?
Không phải có thẻ nữa? Có thẻ của thẻ tôi được tiền mà.
Qua có bay được đâu, không đủ.
Đi qua á? Ờ.
6.
Thứ sáu. Dạ điên không? Sống hơi yếu rồi. Cái tiền tại vì cái số thì nó buôn thủa lắm rồi mình nó có số cái việc kiểu tam hoa tấn công chính giá các cặp để khác nhau rồi khác nhau nhiều chứ nhưng mà thường là bản nó chạy nhất thì các bạn giải cao nhất nó là hai hai năm sáu tám chín. Tôi kể cả em tam hoa của tôi ấy, cái này là mình hay chạy mình bán, cái này là mình có thể trên định chúng ta tự rất là mất gì.
Ta cũng chạy được hai cái luôn và hai cái nó chịu đến một cái.
Của khách cần mình đầu xin. Còn cái năm sinh thì cũng thế luôn, mình cái là vậy. Mình chỉ dự phòng một chút cái sim trắng thôi cho mà ai mình đầu xin vào thì mình không tốn.